Shalom, shalom, Mishpachah. Um, Feast days are fast approaching, and with that said, I've been led to present a few things for us to consider as we get ourselves in our homes prepared for Pesach and unleavened bread. So, prayerfully, this meets you in shalom. I pray you have shalom in your households. Uh, we know that these feast days are acts of worship, and we know that the Father is looking for those that will worship in both spirit and truth. So we definitely want to focus on the spiritual aspects of what these patterns are showing us, but um, we don't want to diminish the importance of actually, physically carrying it out either. So, with that being said, my goal here is just to kind of marry the two worlds, both the spiritual and the natural, and try to keep us on point and on solid ground both ways. So, like I said, I don't want to overemphasize the natural because we know without the spiritual understanding, these shadows, these physical shadows, they're pretty much close to valueless. But like I said, with that being said, I also don't want to negate or diminish the natural side of it as well. So, yeah, without further ado, with that being said, I just wanted to offer a couple things for us to take into take into consideration when we go through these feast days, because yeah, the time is here. So this one's gonna be unleavened bread, and like I said, it's just gonna go over a couple of things for us to consider. All right, so Exodus 12 and 18. This is where we get the institution of unleavened bread. It says, "In the first month, on the 14th day of the new moon, in the evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the new moon or new month in the evening. For 7 days, no leaven, seor, is to be found in your houses. For if anyone eats what is leavened, chametz, that same being shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether sojourner or native of the land. Do not eat that which is leavened, chametz again, in all your dwellings you are to eat unleavened bread, matzah." So here we see three different things mentioned. All of these terms are connected with regard to us keeping the feast, but refer to slightly different, more nuanced things. So I just kind of wanted to take a few moments to look at these terms from a practical point of view, and hopefully it will give us a little bit of insight moving forward as we go through these feast days, and it gives us, like I said, some things to consider as you begin to search your dwellings. So matzah, specifically, this is unleavened bread. So we're not only commanded to abstain from leaven, but we are also commanded to eat bread that is unleavened each day of the feast. So that's one thing to keep in mind is we are actually commanded to eat the unleavened bread, not to just stay away from leaven. Um, then the next word there is H7603, our word for seor, which this is basically the leaven itself. So you've got matzah, which is the unleavened bread specifically. Then you've got seor, which is leaven itself, and then we've got H2557, which is chametz, which is this is basically all products that have been leavened, including bread and other products that have been leavened. And we oftentimes, you know, we're often looking at the Feast of Unleavened Bread with only bread in mind. or bread products in mind, but we'll see as we go through this that it actually kind of applies to a little bit more than that. All right, so um, I wanted to take a look at this. This is a document that was found called the Passover Papyrus. This was a document that was found in Elephantine, um, which is in Egypt, um, and it's roughly what 4th, 5th century BC is where this is coming from. So it's interesting because it gives us an account of a Passover being kept, and the Feast of Unleavened Bread being kept, and it's in a quote unquote secular source. So this is interesting because it gives us a bit of insight on how these days were kept historically. Accounts like these can aid us today when we are looking at practically keeping the feast. And it's especially intriguing when we consider that these accounts came from Israelites that were among the diaspora. So, how were they keeping Passover, unleavened bread in ancient times? And then, especially, how were they doing it in the diaspora, with areas that are not in the mainland of Israel, right? So, the Passover Papyrus. So, quick briefing on it. It's a letter sent in 418 BCE by Hananiah, who was evidently affiliated with the Achaemenid administration, and who some speculate is the biblical Hanani, brother of Nehemiah, Nehemiah 1 and 2 and 7 and 2. So Hananiah's letter was addressed to the Judean garrison in Elephantine, and its leader Jedaniah, and is made up of two sections, both fragmentary. And then I've got a picture there to the right of both of those fragments. So here it is. It says, to my brothers, Jedaniah and his colleagues, the Jewish garrison or Yahudi garrison, your brother Hananiah, may Elohim seek after the welfare of my brothers at all times. And now, this year, year 5 of King Darius, it has been sent from the king to Arsames. Now, do you count 14 days in Nisan, which we know is the first month, and on the 14th at twilight observe the Passover, and from the 15th day until the 21st day of Nisan, the festival of unleavened bread observe. 7 days eat unleavened bread. Now be pure and take heed. Do not do work on the 15th day and on the 21st day, and do not drink anything of leaven, and do not eat anything of leaven, nor let it be seen in your houses from the 14th day of Nisan at sunset until the 21st day of Nisan at sunset. And bring into your chambers any leaven which you have in your houses, and seal it up during these days. To my brothers Jedaniah and his colleagues, the Yahudi garrison, your brother Hananiah, son of, and then the rest of it is damaged there. So the question here is, what were they talking about here? Obviously, at first glance, we understand that this is the command for keeping the feast, but when we look at it, we get kind of some nuance there. So what could they have been referring to when they're talking about unleavened drinks? So notice it says, and do not drink anything of leaven, right? So we know about eating things of leaven. And then, like I said, generally speaking, the first thing that comes to our mind is bread, like regular bread. But like I said, when we kind of look at it, we'll see it's a little bit more nuanced. Leaven can go in other things other than bread. That's basically the point. So, unleavened bread, right? H4682, matzah, right? This is from 4711 in the sense of greedily devouring for sweetness, properly sweetness, concretely sweet, that is not soured or bittered with yeast, specifically an unfermented cake or loaf, or elliptically the festival of Passover because no leaven was then used. Unleavened bread, it's an unleavened cake, it's without leaven. So in a moment, we'll look at the difference between unleavened and leavened bread, such as sourdough, um, and how these breads were historically made. But just keep in mind that we were commanded during the process of unleavened bread to eat matzah. So it's not just staying away from leavened bread, but it's also partaking in this quote unquote sweet unleavened bread. Then we had our word for leaven, H7603 Seor. From H7604, it's a barm or yeast cake as swelling by fermentation. Leaven. H7604, Sha'ar, a primitive root properly to swell up. So something about this leaven we know is the purpose of it is that it swells up, it blows up whatever you put it in. That is to be causatively, to make redundant, to leave, be left, to remain. And then in Greek, the Greek parallel is G2219, zume, which is probably from G2204 to ferment, as if boiling up leaven. So in both of these cases here, we're seeing fermentation. It's a barm or a yeast cake, right? So question that we have to ask is, where did leaven or yeast come from? Like, what is it and where does it come from? So in ancient times, this wasn't something that you would just go to a grocery store and buy with no knowledge or concern for how it's made, what it is, or from whence it came. We have this luxury today, but in ancient times, they were in tune and knew how to produce the leaven that they were using. So now our question has to be, if they were commanded not to have any of this leaven in any of their boundaries, right? Any of their dwellings, how would they have understood this then? What was it, right? So what was the leaven that they were using? So how was ancient yeast cultivated? That's the question. Um, and here it is, right? So it says that it's a barm or a yeast cake. So if you look up what a barm is, barm, also called ale yeast, is the foam or scum formed on the top of a fermenting liquid such as beer, wine, or feedstock for spirits or industrial ethanol distillation. So it is used to leaven bread or set up fermentation in a new batch of liquor. Barm, as a leaven, has also been made from ground millet combined with must out of wine tubs and is sometimes used in English baking as a synonym for a natural leaven for sourdough. Various cultures derived from barm, usually Saccharomyces cerevisiae, became ancestral to most forms of brewer's yeast and baker's yeast currently on the market. So basically what that's saying is, in a this barm is this foam or this scum that's on the top of a fermenting liquid. So when you're making beer, wine, alcohol, when it's fermenting, while it's in that process, a scum or a foam forms on the top of it, and then that is full of yeast. And you can scoop that off, and they would then take that, throw that into some dough, and then now you have sourdough basically starting to cook up. And then you can take that same yeast, throw it in a new batch of juice, if you will, and it'll start to turn that into alcohol. So these same um, barms, if you will, are basically the ancestors to all of our common, brewers yeast and baker's yeast that's currently on the market. So just something to keep in mind. And then we've got leaven products, right? So this is not necessarily the leaven directly, but these are products that are made uh, by implementing leaven in the recipe, or what have you. So H2557 chametz is from H2556 to ferment, figuratively extortion, leaven, something that's leavened bread. H2556 chametz, a primitive root to be pungent, that is in taste, sour, that is literally fermented, or figuratively harsh in color, dazzling, to be cruel, something died, to be grieved, or leavened. Now, mind you, all of these things have spiritual implications, which, if you look at the definitions of these words, then it'll kind of tell you what you don't want to have in you as you're going through the feast. But yeah, that's not necessarily the scope of what I'm trying to get at today. Today, I'm kind of looking more at the practical, but it's just something for you to keep in mind. So again, when we're talking about leavened products, keep in mind that the same barm, the Seor, it can be used to leaven bread or set up fermentation in a new batch of liquor, right? So what I want us to see here is that Pesach and unleavened bread are not only talking about bread, but here we are prohibited from consuming all things leavened. So this includes, but is not limited to, bread and doughs, but all things that have been made using leaven. So, for instance, as we will see, things like beer, wines, spirits, and vinegars are also things that are made using yeast/leaven. So, bread is also included on this list, but when we typically think about the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we usually think it's only about bread, but this was only one aspect of the feast. So leavened products. So winemaking involves harvesting grapes, crushing and pressing them, fermenting the juice with, yes, yeast, clarifying the wine, and finally aging and bottling it. So a more detailed breakdown of the process. Harvesting. Grapes are harvested from the vineyard typically between early September and early November in the northern hemisphere, and mid-February to early March in the southern hemisphere. Crushing and pressing. So the harvested grapes are crushed to release the juice, then pressed to separate the juice from the skins, seeds, and stems. Fermentation. Now remember, we were seeing that word fermentation and how it kept coming up. So yeast converts the sugars in the grape juice into alcohol, carbon dioxide, and other compounds, transforming the juice into wine. This process can occur naturally with native yeast or with cultivated yeast added by winemakers. Clarification. The wine is clarified to remove any remaining solids or sediment through racking, filtering, or fining. Aging and bottling. The wine is aged in stainless steel tanks or oak barrels to develop its flavors and aromas, then bottled and stored for maturation. So again, the point that I'm making here is just keep in mind that alcoholic beverages, beers, wines, vinegars, these are all things that, I would venture to say most of the time are made with the addition of leaven. They're made with leaven because literally that is what alcohol is. Alcohol is a byproduct of yeast eating sugar. So even we can go and get some Welch's grape juice and get a pack of fast acting yeast or um, like baker's yeast, and you can add that yeast to the Welch's grape juice, and it will start to turn into alcohol. It might not be the best quality stuff, but it will turn into alcohol. So, yeah, just some things, like I said, to keep in mind, because these are things that we don't generally think about when we think about the feast day. And it's something that you might want to consider. So, comments, like I said, we're looking at these leaven products. We just looked at these first two definitions, and then I added a third one on here because I want us to see that even within the biblical language, there, like, this was a connection, because obviously they understood how to make this stuff. So we're a little bit disconnected because we're not hands on with making it. So we're not really thinking about the process of how wines, vinegars, and all of these things are made. But for them in their day, they would have been in tune with it, which is why when we go back to those elephantine, to the papyrus, like, they were commanded basically and told and instructed not to have anything, not to eat or drink any products with leaven. But anyways, H2557, we saw that was comets, something basically to ferment, to be leavened. And then we looked at 2556, comets, same word, same three letters, to be pungent, that is in taste, to be sour, that is literally fermented, or figuratively harsh in color, dazzling, right? Now I want to introduce H2558, which is the exact same three, spelled the exact same way, same three letters. They put different vowel pointers on it. They pronounce it as homets, which is from 2566. This is vinegar. Give you an example, Numbers 6 and 3, talking about the Nazarite. And it says, he separates himself from wine and strong drink. He drinks neither vinegar of wine. So right there, it lets you know that vinegar comes from wine, nor vinegar of strong drink. Neither does he drink any grape juice, nor eat grapes or raisins. So vinegar, homets, related to chametz, which is something that's leaven. It's all connected here. So the process of making vinegar. Vinegar is made through a two-step fermentation process. First, sugar is converted to alcohol by yeast. Again, remember we said a couple moments ago that alcohol is a byproduct of yeast eating sugar. To really, yeast is a living organism. It basically eats and feeds on sugar and kind of, for lack of a better term, it poops out alcohol. It's basically how this process is working. So sugar is converted to alcohol by yeast, and then alcohol is converted to acetic acid, the sour taste, by acetic acid bacteria in the presence of oxygen. So here's a more detailed explanation. Step 1, alcohol fermentation. So you can't get vinegar without first getting wine, some strong drink, whatever. It has to go through that process of generating the alcohol, which requires yeast. Vinegar production starts with a sugar source like apples, for apple cider vinegar, or grapes for wine vinegar. The sugar is fermented by yeast, which converts the sugar into alcohol or ethanol. Step 2, acetic acid fermentation. Once alcohol is present, acetic acid bacteria like Acetobacter or Gluconobacter consume the alcohol, and in the process, in the presence of oxygen, convert it into acetic acid, the compound responsible for vinegar's sour taste. And then again, when we're looking at our definitions here, it's something to be pungent, that is sour. So variations in vinegar. Different types of vinegar are made from different starting materials such as fruit, apple cider, and wine, grains, malt, and rice, um, or even distilled alcohol. The flavor profile of the final vinegar is influenced by the type of raw material used. So, Deuteronomy 16 and 1. Guard the new moon or new month of Abib and perform the Pesach to Yahuwah your Elohim. For in the new month or new moon of Abib, Yahuwah your Elohim brought you out of Mizraim by night. And you shall slaughter the Pesach to Yahuwah your Elohim from the flock and from the herd in the place where Yahuwah chooses to put his name. Eat no leavened bread with it. For 7 days you eat unleavened bread with it. So again, for 7 days you eat the unleavened bread. We're commanded to actually eat the matzah for 7 days. You don't want to skip out on that part. Bread of affliction, because you came out of the land of Mizraim in haste, so that you remember the day in which you came out of the land of Mizraim all the days of your life. Again, we are remembering to eat the unleavened bread, not just stay away from leavened bread. You want to partake in in eating of the unleavened bread for 7 days because you want to remember that. And it says, verse 4, and no leaven, no seor, should be seen with you and all your border for 7 days. Neither should any of the meat which you slaughter in the evening on the first day stay all night until morning. So again, it's just something for us that we might want to consider. I know for me and my house, we try to make it a practice to remove as many products containing leavening agents, and especially yeast, as we have knowledge of. So this does include vinegars, products containing vinegars, um, you know, uh, uh, wines, things like that have actually gone through that process of fermentation, where yeast would have been added to get the end result. So anything that was made with yeast, I've even you look on the other processed things, like there was a dry roasted peanuts that had yeast in the ingredients that they just added just for flavor. So you find yeast in all kinds of weird places, um, and it kind of makes it a learning experience year by year. But again, I don't want to harp too much on the natural side of it, but I also don't want to neglect it either. So if we're trying to keep both sides of it, these are just some things for us to keep in mind that might be useful for us, and just keep it in our mind. So leavening agents, you have some other additional leavening agents, keeping in spirit of the feast day. I'm looking at how these leavening agents operate. They puff up, so on and so forth. Yeast is the only thing. So for people who are looking to, abstain from other leavening agents other than yeast, I'm not mad at it. Like I said, me and my house, we generally try to remove as much of it, but I'll leave that up to you and, how the Ruach leads you. But here's a list. It's not at all, extensive, but definitely, some other common leavening agents that are used in a more modern sense today. So, of course, we got yeast, baker's yeast, dried yeast. We've got baking powder and baking soda. Those are some things to keep in mind. They're modern leavening agents. Cream of tartar, potassium bitartrate, sourdough and sourdough starter, obviously. And you can, in the ancient times, you could take a piece of sourdough, because that sourdough has yeast in it. You can take just a piece of the sourdough and put it in a new unleavened batch of dough, and it'll leaven that. A little bit of leaven leavens the whole lump. So, sourdough starter. ammonium carbonate, ammonium bicarbonate, potassium carbonate, potassium bicarbonate, uh, dipotassium carbonate, beer, wine, alcohols. Like I mentioned, vinegars, because vinegars come from wines, alcohols. Um, yeah, these are all things that would have been, those things are things that would have been made with yeast. And then, like I said, we've got the addition of a few, modern leavening agents if your heart desires, uh, if it's your heart's desire to, you know, remove other sources of leaven as well. So, with that being said, I'm gonna bid shalom. I just wanted to, just kind of present that, give us some things, like I said, to kind of mull over, ponder on, and just seek the Father's guidance on it, because I know that these are things that we don't generally think about when it comes to things that are leavened or leavening agents, but um, knowing it just wouldn't be right for me to not share it. So I figured, hey, I get on here and do something light and just present it, and like I said, uh, kind of just be let the Ruach lead you, and if you're led to, you know, um, move in this direction, and all praises. If not, hey, all praises. But I at least wanted to share the information. So yeah, with that, like I said, my prayer is that it meets everybody with shalom, gives us something to consider as we go through the feast. I'm looking forward to um, Shabbat, when we can gather together. We can memorialize this feast day and this season here. And yeah, I know we're gonna get spiritually fed, so I didn't want to go too much in that direction regarding the feast. But I did want to, lead it into it, just kind of, set this out there. So, yeah, like I said, prayerfully it meets everybody with shalom. Alan Yahoo here. I'm signing off. Shalom, y'all.